On your journey towards retirement planning or financial independence planning, and you find yourself staring into this big table of numbers and you just feel a knot in your stomach and you feel overwhelmed, don't worry, you're not alone. Most experts make it sound like you need a PhD in mathematics or accounting and finance to go through retirement planning. That's not really the case because financial planning isn't really about the money. Ironically, it's about time, and one of the key criteria is understanding time value of money and compound. Now in this video, I'm going to show you 3 methods that I've built into a calculator that you can apply directly to know what is comfortable for you to retire. You could even retire tomorrow not knowing in the past of how to calculate it. So stay till the end, and I'm very sure you'll be enlightened after using the calculator. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is John, former engineer turned full-time investor, wealth planning director at Phillip Capital Malaysia, licensed financial planner with the Securities Commission of Malaysia, and author of an upcoming book called The Malaysian Multi-Baggers that will be out in stores very soon. Now before we start punching numbers into the calculator, let me first explain the 3 methods that I will be using. The first method is what we call a capital preservation method, the second method capital depletion, and the last method a rule of 72 method. So for capital preservation method, as the name implies, what we are trying to do is the capital is not withdrawn, only interest generated from this capital is actually withdrawn so that your capital can, outlast you even. For the capital depletion method, you are actually withdrawing the capital plus the interest earned so that over a certain period of time, by the time you estimate you're going to pass on or into your demise, that's when the capital plus the interest will actually go down to 0. And the last method is the rule of 72 method. I feel that this method is the most efficient in a way, where you actually use capital to its most efficient manner by doubling, calculating the period in which you can double your capital. And then once you reach a certain threshold, you take half, you draw down that half for your spending for a certain period of time, and then you double it again. So don't worry if it sounds a little bit more confusing, especially for rule of 72, because I'm going to show you in the calculator. A quick refresher for those unfamiliar with the rule of 72. The rule of 72 actually states that if you take the number 72 and you divide it against your compounding rate of return, or R, it will equal the number of years it will take to double your money. For instance, if you take 72 and you divide by the fixed deposit rates in Malaysia at 3%, 72 divided by 3, you get 24. That means it will take 24 years, compounding at 3% a year, for you to double your money. If you put 1,000 ringgit in a fixed deposit account earning 3% a year, it will take you 24 years before it actually doubles without you withdrawing somewhere in between. Whatever interest is just compounded back into the capital, and it just rolls until 24 years later it doubles. If your compounding rate of return is 10%, so 72 divided by 10, it gives you 7.2. 7.2 means that if you put 1,000 ringgit in an account that gives you 10% compounding returns, that means within 7.2 years that 1,000 ringgit becomes 2,000 ringgit. That is basically the rule of 72. It's a quick rule of thumb estimated method on how fast you can actually double your money. So let's start off with the calculator, and I'm going to show you step by step on Excel first, and I'm going to show you also the calculator I've actually put on my website so you can go and try it. First, we start out with a monthly expense, and let's just assume that your monthly expenses is 20,000 a month over here, right? The calculator will calculate that it is actually a 240,000 annual expense, and then you can start keying in, okay, your planned yearly holiday of 20,000 ringgit. And if you have children of university going age and you plan to spend maybe 20,000 or more, you key in all that assumption. So let's put in 20,000 holiday and 20,000 for your yearly children expenses. That comes out to about 280,000 a year. And then if you believe the inflation rate is, let's say, okay, 4, or no, let's put 5 to be a little bit more conservative. And you started keying or planning this at your 50th birthday, and you plan to retire at 60 years old. So the tenure of the inflation rate will run over 10 years. So 10 years from today at 50 till 2036, right, would be your yearly expenses would have inflated to 456,000, 457,000 lah, to be easy, right? 10 years of 5% inflation, 280,000 this year. 10 years from now, it will be almost double lah, 457,000. That's what it means by these figures here. So remember the three methods I mentioned earlier: capital preservation, capital depletion, and the rule of 72. Let's assume that the risk-free rate or your fixed deposit rate is at 4%, or let's just say it's at 3%, right? So what it means that the capital that you need, that you only draw down 3% a year to be able to match 457,000, is you need a capital of 15 million. 15 million, 3%, that's where you get 456,000. That's, you only draw down the interest, you don't draw down the principal. Now the pro of this method is that your capital will be preserved forever and ever lah, right? Obviously there's lifestyle creep, inflation creep, but let's simplify the math here. Big pot, 15 million, capital preservation till kingdom come, right? And risk-free rate is at 3%. Now, the second method, which is the capital depletion method, also assumes the same thing. You retire at 60 years old and you live till 80, for example. So that's why I put here 20 years, right? You can actually change this number here. And knowing that you need 457,000 every year, right? Your total required pot is 9.1 million. So that means you put 9.1 million that pot, and you withdraw 457,000 every year over the next 20 years, assuming you live till 80, not past 80, then you need 9.1 million. Now, both method 1, capital preservation, and method 2, capital depletion, you see that the requirements are actually quite high, 15 million, 9 million, or on an monthly expenses of 20,000 only, yeah, right? So now I'm going to introduce you the third method, which I think is the most capital efficient method, and it's called the rule of 72 method. Recall earlier part of the video where I taught you about the rule of 72, the doubling, 72 divided by your rate of return, compounding rate of return equals the number of years it takes to double your money, right? So let's be a bit conservative lah. Let's not shoot for the moon at 20%, right? If you can do 20%, you only need 3 million to retire, right? But let's be a little bit more realistic and says, let's say return is at 8%, right? So 72 divided by 8, you get 9 years. That means every 9 years at an 8% compound, you will double your money. Because of that, knowing that you need 457,000, right? The pot that you need is actually 8.2 million, right? Which is substantially less than the capital preservation method and 1 million less than the capital depletion method. Now, the beauty of this is that, yes, the amount is less, but the secondly is how can this actually outlast you even upon your passing, because it combines capital preservation at the same time making your capital work harder. So what do you do with this 8.2 million? Okay, you take it into two pots. You divide it into two pots. The first pot is your spending pot. I'm going to highlight it in probably light yellow here. Okay, your spending pot is 4.1 million, and you know that you need 457,000 every year. Sorry, you withdraw it for 9 years. This 4.1 million will be zero. So every year you just withdraw, and after 9 years it becomes zero. Obviously you can stretch it a little bit by putting into fixed D or whatever, and then you only withdraw the first year of spending or second year of spending, right? But by and large, I think what I want to come across is that the message of, or the concept of a spending pot and an investment pot. Now moving to the investment pot, the other half of the 8.2 million is 4.1 million. Now, you do not touch this pot. You allow it to compound at a rate of 8%. That's what we keyed in, the assumption. And from the rule of 72, you know that 72 divided by 8, you should be able to double your money in 9 years, right? 9 years over here. So 4.1 million compounding 8% a year. After 9 years, it should come back to double, or 8.2 million. Realize that this amount and the original amount 9 years before was going to be the same. So from here, what do? You apply the same method. You draw down half of this, you put half into an investment pot, and you put half into a spending pot where you, after 9 years, you rinse and repeat the process over and over again. So as I mentioned earlier, you preserve your capital. Obviously, your capital has to work a little bit harder at 8% now. The next question you should be asking me is that, John, how on earth am I going to find 8.2 million? Even that's the most capital efficient. I think that's something that there are ways that we could work together to figure it out. But I think more importantly, the burden of that has to lie on you. Either you have to increase your income, increase your saving rate, and reduce your expenses, because that is the reality of things. I mean, the math don't lie. Now, most people, they just completely shun away from this process is because they think that the math is really complicated and it's all numbers. I mean, I just did arithmetic. There's nothing, there's no calculus involved in calculating this retirement amount. But a lot of people, I think they just shun away because they think it's a very complicated process. I don't believe it should be so. And I've already shown you a realistic calculator to be able to, for you to define a goal. Because most people, what happens is this. They become conservative all their life because whatever they've saved or tried to invest, they fear losing that capital. They don't want to understand risk. They don't want to lean into understanding risk. But what happens is that over time, if your capital invested in conservative assets at 3% a year, right, the fixed D, right, what happens is inflation is slowly eroding that purchasing power, right? Slowly eroding. So 20 years old, 30 years old, you just conservative, you just put into fixed D. By the time you reach your 50 and 60 years old, then you realize, oh no, it is actually not enough. And anywhere around, this problem is not just in Malaysia or Asia where I live. Its problem is a globalized problem as long as there's an inflation going on. Maybe in Japan, when inflation is not so high, you have some deflation, yeah, maybe you can get away with more purchasing power in the future. But anywhere that has an inflation, that is going to erode into your purchasing power. And that's why you need to find and understand risk-adjusted asset classes that should be able to give you at least 6, 7, or 8, or hopefully 10, 12% kind of return. Only then you can kind of get ahead of inflation. And why I'm showing you this calculator is for you to have this awareness of not waiting for that big amount to happen, at retirement, whatever, and then you work it out then. Is for you to allow time to be your friend. You allow compound, you start a certain amount of money, and then you let compound. Also use time to your compounding time to actually understand risk. There's bound to be mistakes in investing. I made so many investing mistakes in my life, right? Lost countless amounts of money, but then it helps you understand risk better. It helps you embrace a skill set that you know that, hey, some of these are going to be scams. Some of these that promise you unrealistic returns are likely going to be scams. And that's what I want to prevent, especially those guys that have been conservative all their life and they realize it's not enough at the 50, 60 years old. That's when they take even more risk. And that's where they realize that because it's not enough and because of this emotional fear, they take on things that promise them capital guarantee and pay them very high yields of 12%. Think about it. If it's so lucrative and can pay you yields of 12%, why is the bank not doing it? Right? They are, in a way, the licensed guys to actually kind of lend money to you, and they are protected by regulation, and yet they can't even give you the kind of guaranteed return. And what more to say, some guy that you hardly know, an institution that hardly knows and promise you this kind of returns. I think that's where they prey on the fear of guys that have been conservative all their life and they realize it's not enough. And hopefully this calculator, and I've built it into my website, so I'll go to the website, it's just johnhua.com/calculators, and you will see that the calculator is at the top. My video is covering it, but just go to johnhua.com and you will see it at the top right hand tab. You'll be able to click on the tab calculator, and that's where you key in all this, right? So very similar monthly expenses, yearly holidays, and hopefully this becomes an awareness to you that allow time to be your friend, allow time to be your ally, compound early, and then you just not just compound your money, but you also compound your experience and understanding risk better. I'll see you in the next video. Looking forward to enlightening you with more financial awareness and education.